Jake felt his human identity slipping away as he became part of something vast and terrible and wonderful. But he held on to one thought: protect Earth, protect humanity, protect life itself. The command ship began to shake as its systems failed. On the displays, Jake could see other Devourer vessels suddenly changing course, firing on their own allies, or simply shutting down completely. The perfect coordination of the fleet was collapsing into chaos. In the solar system, Admiral Parker watched in amazement as the enemy fleet tore itself apart. "What's happening?" she demanded. "Unknown," Dr. Foster replied, staring at her scanners. "Their ships are attacking each other. It's like they've gone completely insane." On Earth, people looked up at the sky to see something incredible: the darkness. At the edge of the solar system was being consumed by brilliant blue fire as Devourer ships exploded or turned their weapons on each other. The void itself seemed to be burning. Back on the command ship, Jake felt his consciousness expanding beyond the single vessel to encompass the entire Devourer network. For a brief moment, he was connected to every ship in the fleet, every weapon, every computer system. The power was incredible, but it was also destroying him. With his last act as Jake Morrison, he triggered a chain reaction that spread through the entire fleet. Every Devourer ship began to self-destruct simultaneously, creating a wave of explosions that lit up the galaxy. But Jake was no longer entirely human. His consciousness had merged with the Guardian network, with the trapped souls of consumed civilizations, with something larger than any individual mind. He had become part of the fire and the void itself. When the explosions finally ended, the solar system was quiet. The Devourer fleet was gone, reduced to scattered debris and fading energy. Humanity had won, but at a terrible cost. On Titan Station, Dr. Foster stared at the Guardian control systems. They were still active, still glowing with blue light, but something was different. When she placed her hands on the controls, she could feel a familiar presence. "Jake," she whispered. The lights pulsed once, as if in response. Admiral Parker approached the station. "Is he changed?" Dr. Foster said softly. "He's part of the network now, part of the Guardians who watch over the galaxy." Years later, when new civilizations developed space travel, they would find the Guardian network waiting for them. The blue lights would teach them about the universe, warn them of dangers, and protect them from threats they couldn't imagine. And sometimes, just sometimes, young explorers would feel a familiar presence guiding their hands as they learned to interface with the ancient technology. They would sense the consciousness of a young man who had once disobeyed orders and accidentally saved the galaxy. Jake Morrison was gone, but his fire burned on in the void, watching over the stars and keeping the darkness at bay. The cadet who had ignored orders had become something greater, a guardian of all life. Forever part of the network that protected the galaxy from threats unknown. The void was no longer dark. It burned with the light of hope, courage, and the unbreakable human. The spirit that refused to surrender, no matter how impossible the odds. The day of the final battle dawned with no sun. The Devourer fleet had arrived at the edge of the solar system like a wall of darkness, blocking out the stars. Jake stood in the command center of Titan Station, watching thousands of enemy ships. On the main display, each vessel was the size of a city, and there were more of them than he could count. "All Guardian weapons are online," Dr. Foster reported. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see her hands shaking as she worked at her controls. "Human fleet in position," Admiral Parker announced. 300 ships ready for battle. Jake looked at the smaller number representing their own forces. It seemed impossible that they could win, but they had to try. Behind them was Earth, Mars, and billions of innocent people who were counting on them. "Jake," Professor Mitchell said quietly, "the transport system is ready. You sure about this?" Jake nodded, though his heart was pounding with fear. The plan was simple, but dangerous. While the main fleet kept the Devourers busy, Jake would use the Guardian network to teleport directly onto their command ship. If he could interface with their technology and disrupt their coordination, it might give humanity a chance. "Remember," Agent Sullivan said, checking his equipment one last time. You'll only have minutes before they detect you. Get to their central computer and do whatever you can to cause chaos. Jake strapped on the portable Guardian interface device that Dr. Foster had built for him, would let him connect with Alien technology even without a full control station. He hoped it would be enough. Devourer fleet is moving, Lieutenant Carter called out. They're entering the outer system. Admiral Parker activated the ship-wide communication system. All ships. This is Admiral Parker. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every living thing in the galaxy. The Devourers have consumed countless worlds, but they will not have ours. All units engage the enemy. The space around them exploded into light and fire. Human. Ships launched missiles and energy beams at the approaching darkness. The Guardian weapons platforms fired massive blue bolts that lit up the void like lightning. For a moment, Jake felt hope as several Devourer ships exploded under the assault. But the hope didn't last long. The enemy fleet was too large, too powerful. For every Devourer ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The black vessels fired back with weapons that seemed to eat light itself, leaving holes in space where human ships used to be. Guardian. Platform 7 is down, someone reported. Platform 12 is under heavy attack. Jake watched the battle unfold with growing desperation. They were holding the line for now, but barely. Soon the Devourers would break through their defenses and reach Earth. Jake, you need to go now, Admiral Parker said. While they're still distracted, Jake took a deep breath and walked to the Guardian transport chamber. It was a small room, filled with the same blue light as all architect technology. When he stepped inside, he could feel the ancient systems scanning him, preparing to send him across space in an instant. Good luck, Dr. Foster said over the communication system. See you on the other side, Jake replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The transport activated, and Jake felt like he was being pulled apart and put back together. For a moment that lasted forever, he existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Then suddenly he was standing in a dark corridor filled with strange, pulsing lights. He was inside the Devourer command ship. The corridor was enormous, built for creatures much larger than humans. The walls were covered with organic-looking technology that seemed to breathe and pulse with its own life. Jake could hear sounds coming from deeper in the ship, clicks and whispers that didn't sound like any language he knew. He activated the portable interface device and immediately felt it connecting with the ship's systems. The technology was similar to the architect's systems, but twisted somehow, corrupted by millions of years of consuming other civilizations. Jake moved carefully through the corridors, following the interface signals toward what he hoped was the central computer. The ship was like a living creature, with passages that curved and branched like blood vessels. Occasionally, he passed chambers filled with floating tanks that contained things he didn't want to look at too closely. Come on, he whispered to himself. Where's the command center? As if responding to his words, the interface device pulsed more strongly, pointing him toward a massive chamber at the heart of the ship. Jake hurried in that direction, knowing that every second counted. The command center was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a vast spherical room with no floor or ceiling, just curved walls covered in displays showing every ship in the Devourer fleet. At the center of the room floated a massive organic computer that pulsed with dark energy. Jake activated his interface device and reached out toward the central computer. The moment he made contact, pain shot through his mind like fire. The Devourer. Technology was fighting him, trying to reject his human consciousness. But Jake had spent months learning to work with alien systems. He pushed through the pain and forced his way deeper into the ship's computer network. What he found there horrified him. The Devourers weren't just destroyers, they were the remnants of countless consumed civilizations, all merged into one terrible, collective consciousness. Could feel the screams of billions of dead minds trapped within the ship's computer systems. I'm sorry, Jake whispered to the trapped souls. I'm going to set you free. He began rewriting the ship's control programs. Using techniques he had learned from the Guardian network, the Devourer computer fought back, sending waves of agony through his nervous system. But Jake refused to give up. On the displays around him, he could see the battle in the solar system. Human ships were falling like leaves, and the Guardian Weapons were being overwhelmed. He had to hurry. Jake found the fleet coordination protocols and began changing them. Instead of working together, the Devourer's ships would turn on each other. He planted logic bombs in their weapon systems and created feedback loops in their power grids. But the ship's defenses were adapting to his presence. Security systems were activating, and he could hear mechanical sounds approaching from the corridors. Outside, Jake made a desperate decision. Instead of trying to escape, he merged his consciousness completely with the ship's computer. It was incredibly dangerous. He might lose himself entirely. But it was the only way to cause maximum damage, as his mind expanded into the Devourer network. Jake felt the pain of every consumed civilization, but he also felt their strength, their knowledge, their desperate desire for revenge against their destroyers. "Help me," he called out to the trapped minds. "Help me destroy them." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Billions of dead souls joined their will to his, using their combined knowledge to turn the Devourer technology against itself. The organic computer began to tear itself apart as conflicting programs warred for control. 6 months had passed since Jake activated the Guardian network. The young man who had once been confined to quarters was now standing in the command center of Titan Station, humanity's largest space facility. Around him, dozens of technicians worked frantically to prepare for the coming war. "Jake, we need you at Station 7, Dr. Foster called out. She looked tired after months of constant work, but her eyes still held the excitement of discovery. "The Architect weapon system is online, but it won't accept commands from anyone but you." Jake hurried over to the news station. It was a mixture of human technology and alien systems recovered from Guardian structures across the galaxy. The control panel glowed with the same blue light as the network. When Jake placed his hands on it, he could feel the ancient technology responding to his touch. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "Try to link it with our defense grid," said Tony Richards, the physicist who had been working on the weapon systems. "If we can get the Architect guns to coordinate with our ships, we might have a chance." Jake closed his eyes and focused on the alien technology. Over the past months, he had learned to interface with the Guardian systems in ways that amazed even the scientists. It was like the ancient machines were designed to work with his mind. The weapon system came to life under his control. On the main screen, lines of energy connected the Architect weapons to human ships throughout the solar system. For the first time in weeks, Jake allowed himself to feel a small bit of hope. "Excellent work," said Admiral Grace Parker, who had arrived from Earth that morning. She was a stern woman with silver hair and the kind of presence that made everyone pay attention when she spoke. "How many systems are fully operational?" 47 Architect weapons platforms, Professor Mitchell reported. Plus 300. Human ships equipped with modified quantum cannons. "It's not enough to match the Devourer fleet, but it's better than we had a month ago." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy. A dark cloud at the edge of the galaxy had grown larger and more detailed as it came closer. Individual ships could now be seen, massive black vessels that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. "Any word from the other species?" Admiral Parker asked. Agent Sullivan, who had become the liaison between human forces and alien governments, shook her head. "The Zilani are still debating. Corvus refused to believe the threat is real. Only the Viridians have committed ships to help us." Jake felt frustrated. The Guardian network had sent warnings to every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy, but most of them were too afraid or too stubborn to work together. Humans had become the leaders of the defense effort almost by default, Admiral Lieutenant Carter said from his station. "I'm receiving an urgent message from the Outer Sensor Network. The Devourer fleet has just entered our galaxy." The command center went quiet. Everyone stared at the main screen as new contacts appeared at the galaxy's edge. There were more ships than anyone had expected, thousands of dark vessels spreading out like a cancer. "Time to our solar system?" Admiral Parker asked. 8 months at their current speed," Carter replied. "But Admiral, they're not coming straight. For us, they're hitting the Outer Rim colonies first." Jake watched in horror as the display showed the Devourer ships descending on inhabited worlds. Each planet they touched went dark within hours. Millions of people were dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "We have to help them," Jake said. We can't, Admiral Parker replied grimly. If we send our ships out there, we'll be destroyed piecemeal. Our only chance is to make our stand here in the solar system, where we have the Guardian weapons to support us. So we just let them die? Commander Hayes, who had been promoted to Admiral Parker's staff, put a hand on Jake's shoulder. Sometimes, in war, you have to make impossible choices. Save who we can. Over the next 2 months, Jake watched the galaxy burn. The Devourers moved methodically from system to system, consuming everything in their path. A few refugee ships made it to Earth, bringing stories of the destruction. Survivors all told the same tale: the Devourer ships would arrive suddenly, release swarms of smaller vessels that stripped away all life, then move on to the next. Target Jake threw himself into his work, trying not to think about the billions of people who were dying. He spent 18 hours a day interfacing with Guardian technology, learning to coordinate the ancient weapons with human tactics. The alien systems seemed to adapt to his thoughts, becoming extensions of his will. Jake, Dr. Foster said one evening, as he worked alone in the command center, you need to rest. You've been here for 3 straight days. I can't rest, Jake replied without looking up from his controls. Every minute I waste, more people die. And if you collapse from exhaustion, everyone dies. The Guardian systems only work with you. If something happens to you, we lose our best weapons. Jake knew she was right, but he couldn't stop. The guilt of starting this whole crisis still weighed on him. If he hadn't fired that quantum cannon, maybe the Devourers would have passed by their galaxy without noticing it. This isn't your fault, Dr. Foster said, reading his thoughts. Professor Mitchell ran the calculations. The Devourers were already heading this way. Your activation of the network just gave us warning and the tools to fight back. But what if we lose? Then at least we'll go down fighting instead of being caught by surprise. A new alarm sounded throughout the station. Jake looked up to see Captain Walsh entering the command center with urgent news. The Devourers have taken the Centauri system, Walsh reported. They're only 4 months away now. Admiral Parker studied the tactical display. Any change in their pattern? Yes, ma'am. They're moving faster now, not stopping to consume every world. It's like they know we're waiting for them. Jake felt a chill. The Devourers were intelligent, not just mindless consumers. They were adapting. Their strategy. Admiral Professor Mitchell called out. I've finished analyzing the final Guardian records. There's something you need to see. Everyone gathered around Mitchell's station as he displayed ancient data from the Architect archives. The Devourers aren't just destroyers, Mitchell explained. They're builders, too. They consume civilizations to fuel their own growth. Every species they destroy makes them stronger. How much stronger? Admiral Parker asked. Based on what they've consumed in our galaxy already, their fleet is now 20% larger than when they arrived. Jake stared at the display in disbelief. You mean they're using our dead worlds to build more ships? Exactly. There's more. The architects discovered that the Devourers have a central command ship, a massive vessel that coordinates their entire fleet. If that ship could be destroyed, the rest of the fleet would become disorganized. Where is this command ship? Admiral Parker demanded. At the center of their formation, protected by thousands of other vessels. The architects tried to reach it during their final battle, but they failed. Jake looked at the tactical display, showing the approaching Devourer fleet. Somewhere in that dark cloud was the key to victory, but it might as well have been on the other side of the universe, Admiral, Agent Sullivan said. I have an idea. It's dangerous, but it might work. Hear it. We don't meet them in space. We let them come to us, draw them into the solar system where our Guardian weapons are strongest. Then, while they're distracted fighting our main fleet, a small force tries to reach their command ship. That's suicide, Commander Hayes said. Whoever attempts that mission won't be coming back. Jake felt something click in his mind. He looked at the Guardian control systems, then at the tactical display, then back at the ancient weapons. Not necessarily, he said slowly. What if we don't send ships? What if we send just one person? Everyone stared at him. The Guardian network can transport matter instantaneously between structures, Jake continued. If I could get close enough to their command ship, I might be able to interface with it directly, The Devourers use technology similar to the Architects. Maybe similar enough that I could take control. Admiral Parker shook her head. Too risky. You're too valuable to lose. On a desperate gamble? With respect, Admiral, it's not a gamble if it's our only chance. Jake looked around the room at the faces of people who had become his friends and mentors over the past months. They had all sacrificed so much to get this far. The Devourers will be here in 4 months, he said. We need to start preparing for a battle that will decide the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. Outside the station's windows, the stars continued to burn with the light of the Guardian network. But Jake knew that soon those stars would be battlefields. The fire in the void was about to become something much more dangerous. It was about to become war. Jake sat in the small prison cell aboard Captain Walsh's ship, the Phoenix. 3 days had passed since his arrest, and he felt worse with each hour. Through the small window, he could see the alien structure still glowing in the distance. Moored ships had arrived. A whole fleet now surrounded the strange metal flower. The door to his cell opened with a soft hiss. Captain Walsh walked in, followed by Commander Hayes and a woman Jake didn't recognize. She was tall, with black hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to see everything. Cadet Morrison, Captain Walsh said. He was an older man, with gray hair and a tired face. This is Agent Kate Sullivan from Military Intelligence. She wants to ask you some questions. Jake stood up straight. Yes, sir. Agent Sullivan studied him for a moment. Relax, Cadet. You're not in any more trouble than you already are. I just want to understand exactly what you did and why you did it. I told Commander Hayes everything, ma'am. Thought the structure was going to collapse. I calculated an energy pulse that might stabilize it. And where did you learn to make those calculations? Jake felt confused. At the Academy, ma'am. Basic quantum mechanics and energy field theory. Sullivan exchanged a look with Captain Walsh. Cadet, what you did was far beyond basic theory. Our best scientists have been studying your calculations, and they're having trouble understanding how you got the frequency exactly right. I got lucky, I guess. Lucky. Sullivan smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. Do you have any idea what you've accomplished? You didn't just save one structure. You activated a communication network that spans the entire galaxy. A network that's been dead for over 3 million years. Jake stared at her. 3 million years. That's our best estimate based on the technology analysis. And Cadet, we've decoded part of the warning message. Captain Walsh stepped forward. We're bringing you up to the main conference room. Dr. Foster and the other scientists want you to hear this. Jake followed them through the corridors of the Phoenix. The ship was much larger than the Liberty, with wide hallways and powerful weapon systems. As they walked, he could see crew members staring at him. Some looked curious, others looked angry. Word had spread about what he had done. The conference room was packed with people. Jake recognized Dr. Foster and Lieutenant Carter from the Liberty. There were also several people he didn't know, scientists and military. Officers from other ships in the fleet. At the front of the room stood a thin man with messy brown hair and thick glasses. Captain Walsh introduced him as Professor Dan Mitchell, a specialist in alien languages. Cadet Morrison, Professor Mitchell said, please sit down. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to believe. Jake took a seat near the back of the room. Agent Sullivan sat beside him, still watching him with those sharp green eyes. 3 days ago, you activated what we now call the Guardian Network, Professor Mitchell began. It consists of at least 200 structures scattered across the galaxy. Each structure is a combination of communication relay, data storage, facility, and early warning system. Dr. Foster stood up. The network was built by a species called the Architects. They were incredibly advanced, far beyond anything we've seen before, but they disappeared millions of years ago. Disappeared how? Someone asked. Professor Mitchell's face became grim. They were destroyed. All of them. Every last member of their species, along with dozens of other civilizations. The room went quiet. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Destroyed by what? Captain Walsh asked. By something called the Devourers, Mitchell said, according to the network's records. They come from outside our galaxy. They appear every few million years, consuming entire civilizations before disappearing back into the dark between galaxies. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. You're saying there are aliens that eat whole planets, not just planets? Cadet? Entire star systems? The Devourers strip away all organic matter, all energy sources, everything that can sustain life. They leave behind empty space. Agent Sullivan leaned forward. The architects built the Guardian Network as their last act. They knew they couldn't win against the Devourers, so they created a warning system for future civilizations. A warning. A system that's been waiting for someone to activate it, Dr. Foster added, looking at Jake. Someone who could interface with their technology. Jake shook his head. I just fired an energy beam. Anyone could have done that. No, Professor Mitchell said firmly. We've studied your quantum pulse in detail. The frequency you chose, the power level, the precise timing. It was exactly what the network needed to recognize a new technological civilization. The odds of getting it right by accident are billions to one. So you're saying I'm special somehow? Or saying that human technology and human intuition seem uniquely compatible with architect systems? Agent Sullivan said. And that's important because the network just gave us some very bad news. Captain Walsh activated a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking the positions of the Guardian structures. But at the edge of the map, there was something else, a dark cloud moving toward them. The Devourers are coming back, Walsh said quietly. The network estimates they'll reach our galaxy in approximately 18 months. Jake stared at the dark cloud on the display. It looked like a storm moving across space, consuming everything in its path. How many of them are there? Someone asked. Thousands of ships, Professor Mitchell said. Maybe tens of thousands. The network's records show that they've destroyed hundreds of galaxies over millions of years. What about weapons? Lieutenant Carter asked. The architects must have had some way to fight them. They did, Dr. Foster said. The network contains detailed information about architect defense systems. But most of their technology was destroyed in the final battle. What's left are fragment pieces of the puzzle that we'll need to put together. Agent Sullivan turned to Jake. That's where you come in, Cadet. Me. The network responds to you. We've tested it with other people, but the structures only react. When you're operating the controls, whatever makes you compatible with their technology, we need to understand it. Jake felt overwhelmed. A few days ago, he had been a simple cadet worried about passing his exams. Now they were telling him he was humanity's best hope against an alien invasion. I don't understand, he said. I'm nobody special. Professor Mitchell smiled sadly. Sometimes the most important people are the ones who don't think they're special at all. Captain Walsh stood up. Cadet Morrison, I'm transferring you to the research division. You'll work with Dr. Foster and Professor Mitchell to learn as much as possible about architect technology. Commander Hayes will oversee your training. Jake looked at Commander Hayes. She still looked angry, but there was something else in her eyes now. Maybe respect, or at least understanding. What about my court-martial? Jake asked. Postponed indefinitely, Walsh said. Right now, stopping the Devourers is more important than military discipline. Agent Sullivan leaned over to whisper in Jake's ear. Don't let it go to your head, kid. You may have saved the galaxy by accident, but now you have to do it on purpose. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Through the window, he could see the Guardian structure still glowing with blue light. The fire in the void was spreading, lighting up ancient networks across the galaxy. But now he knew the truth. The fire wasn't just beautiful, it was a warning beacon, guiding out across space with a message that chilled him to the bone. The Devourers were coming, and humanity had 18 months to prepare for a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. The alien structure didn't collapse. Instead, it began to sing. Jake stared at the screen in amazement as waves of blue energy rippled across the massive metal flower. The sound came through the ship's speakers like a deep musical note that seemed to go on forever. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. What did you do? Commander Hayes grabbed Jake by the shoulder and spun him around. Her face was red with anger. I thought I could stabilize it, Jake said, his voice shaking. The energy patterns were collapsing. I calculated the right frequency, too. You calculated nothing, Hayes shouted. You fired an experimental weapon at an unknown alien structure. Without orders, around them, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations. Lieutenant Carter was trying to scan the structure while Dr. Foster analyzed the energy readings. Ryan Davis stood frozen near the back, staring at his best friend in shock. Commander Carter called out, "The structure's energy output has increased by 300%. But it's stable now. Whatever Cadet Morrison did, it worked." "Not the point," Hayes snapped. "The point is that he disobeyed direct orders and put the entire ship at risk." Jake wanted to argue, but he could see that the commander was right. He had acted without thinking. He could have killed everyone on the ship. The fact that his plan had worked didn't change that. Commander Dr. Foster said urgently, "You need to see this." Hayes walked over to Foster's station, dragging Jake with her. The doctor's screen showed the alien structure, but now there were lines of energy shooting out from it in all directions. "What are those?" Hayes asked. "Energy beams," Foster said. "They're traveling faster than light. But they're not random. They're targeting specific coordinates across the galaxy." Carter looked up from his station with wide eyes. "Commander, I'm detecting responses. Whatever those beams hit, they're activating something." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Activating what?" "Unknown," Carter said. "But the energy signatures match the structure we just fired on. I think there are more of them out there, a lot more." Bridge was quiet except for the continuing musical note from the alien structure. Jake realized that everyone was staring at him. What had he done? "How many responses?" Commander Hayes asked in a quiet voice. Carter checked his readings. 47. So far. No, 63. They're still coming online. "This is bad," Ryan whispered to Jake. "This is really bad." But Dr. Foster was shaking her head. "Wait, look at this." She pointed to her screen. "The beams aren't weapons. They're communication signals. The structures are talking to each other?" "Talking about what?" Hayes demanded. "I don't know. The signals are encrypted using mathematics I've never seen before, but they're definitely exchanging information." Jake stared at the screen. The alien structure was still glowing, and now he could see that the blue light was pulsing in patterns. "It almost looked like code," Commander Carter said. "I'm receiving a priority message from Fleet Command. Captain Walsh is on his way with the heavy cruiser Phoenix. ETA for hours." Commander Hayes closed her eyes for a moment. "Of course he is. And what am I supposed to tell him? That one of my cadets started some kind of galactic chain reaction?" Jake felt worse with every passing minute. He had thought he was saving the structure. Instead, he had activated something across the entire galaxy. Who knew what the consequences would be? "There's more," Carter continued. "Command is ordering us to maintain position and monitor the situation until Captain Walsh arrives." "The cadet?" Hayes asked, looking at Jake with cold eyes. "He's to be confined to quarters pending court-martial." Jake nodded. He had expected that. In fact, he probably deserved worse. "Yes, ma'am." "Wait," Dr. Foster said suddenly. "Look at this. The communication signals are changing. They're slowing down, becoming more regular. Almost like ... like what?" Hayes asked. "Like they're trying to match our communication frequencies. I think they're trying to talk to us." Everyone on the bridge stared at Foster's screen. The signals from the alien structures were definitely changing. The complex mathematical patterns were becoming simpler, more like the basic communication. Protocols that human ships used. "That's impossible," Carter said. "How could they know our frequencies?" Jake had an idea, but he was afraid to say it out loud. What if the structures weren't just communicating with each other? What if they were studying the Liberty's systems? His energy blast hadn't just activated the MIT, had given them a sample of human technology, Commander Ryan said from the back of the bridge. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but shouldn't we be worried about what these things want? I mean, Jake just woke up a bunch of ancient alien machines. What if they're hostile?" Hayes looked at the main screen, where the alien structure continued to pulse with blue light. "That's exactly what I'm worried about, Cadet Davis." Over the next hour, more structures came online across the galaxy. The communications network grew stronger and more complex. Dr. Foster worked frantically to decode the signals. But the mathematics were beyond anything humans had ever encountered. Jake sat at a small station near the back of the bridge, officially confined but still allowed to watch since they needed every trained eye to monitor the situation. He felt sick every time another structure activated. Each new signal reminded him that his impulsive action had consequences he couldn't even imagine. Active structures now, Carter reported. The network spans most of the known galaxy. Any sign of hostile action? Hayes asked. None detected. The communication traffic is enormous. Whatever they're saying to each other, it's complex. Jake studied the patterns on his screen. The signals were definitely getting more organized. It was like watching a giant computer network boot up for the first time in millions of years. Commander Dr. Foster said, her voice shaking with excitement. I think I've found something. The signals aren't just random. They're star maps. Star maps? Structures are sharing location data for every star system in the galaxy. But not just current positions. Historical positions, too, going back millions of years, and there's more. Technical specifications for technologies we've never seen. Biological data on thousands of species. It's like a galactic encyclopedia. Hayes walked over to look at Foster's screen. Oh, why would they share all that information? I don't know. But Commander, look at this section. It's different from the rest. The mathematical signature suggested some kind of warning message. Jake leaned forward in his chair. A warning about what? Can you decode it? Hayes asked. I'm trying, but it's incredibly complex. It might take days or weeks to fully understand. Captain. Steve Walsh's voice suddenly filled the bridge. U.S. Liberty, this is Captain Walsh aboard the Phoenix. We're approaching your position. Commander Hayes, please report your status. Hayes walked to the communication station. Captain Walsh, this is Commander Hayes. We have a situation here that's beyond our current ability to handle, so I've heard. Gosh. Is it true that one of your cadets activated an alien structure? Hayes looked at Jake. Yes, sir. Cadet Morrison fired our quantum cannon at the structure without authorization. I see. And what's the current status of the structure? Active and communicating with at least 79 other structures across the galaxy, Dr. Foster believes. They're sharing scientific data, including what might be a warning message of some kind. There was a long pause. A warning about what? Unknown, sir. We're still trying to decode it. Very well. Maintain position until I arrive, and Commander. Place Cadet Morrison under arrest. Jake felt his heart sink. He had known this was coming, but hearing it made it real. His career was over before it had really begun. Yes, sir, Hayes replied, as security officers approached to escort him to the brig. Jake took one last look at the alien structure on the NIA. Main screen. It was still glowing with that beautiful blue light, still singing its strange song. Whatever he had awakened, it was too late to stop it now. The fire in the void was just beginning. Jake Morrison stared at the scanner screen with wide eyes. The 19-year-old cadet had seen many strange things during his 3 months aboard the UES Liberty. But nothing like this. The alien structure floating in the dark void ahead of them was massive. It looked like a giant metal flower with twisted petals that stretched for miles in every direction. What do you think it is? Whispered Ryan Davis, Jake's roommate. The two cadets stood at the back of the bridge, trying to stay out of the way, while the senior officers worked. I don't know, Jake said softly. But look at these energy readings. The numbers on his small scanner were jumping around like crazy. Whatever that thing was, it had power running through it. A lot of power. Jake had studied alien technology at the academy, but he had never seen readings like these before. Commander Lisa Hayes stood at the center of the bridge with her arms crossed. She was a tough woman with gray hair and cold blue eyes. Everyone on the ship knew better than to cross her. She had been in space for 20 years and had seen things that would give most people nightmares. Lieutenant Carter, she called out. What's our status? Ben Carter, a friendly officer with brown hair and kind eyes, looked up from his station. The structure appears to be abandoned, Commander. No life signs. But there's definitely some kind of power source inside. Any signs of weapons? None that we can detect. Commander Hayes nodded slowly. Dr. Foster, what's your assessment? Amy Foster, the ship's expert on alien life, pushed her glasses up her nose. She was young for a doctor, maybe 30, with red hair tied back in a neat bun. The design doesn't match anything in our databases. The metal composition is unknown, but the energy pattern suggests the structure is very old. It's maybe millions of years. Jake felt his heart beat faster. This was exactly the kind of discovery that made him want to be out here among the stars. He had dreamed of finding alien technology since he was a kid. Now here it was, right in front of him. Recommendations? Commander Hayes asked. Standard protocol suggests a detailed scan from safe distance, Lieutenant Carter said, and we report back to command and wait for orders. Jake frowned. That could take weeks. By then, another ship might be sent to investigate, might never get another chance like this. He looked at his scanner again and felt his blood turn cold. The energy readings were changing. The patterns were becoming more unstable by the minute. Commander, he said, stepping forward before he could stop himself. Commander Hayes turned to look at him with raised eyebrows. Yes, Cadet. Jake's mouth felt dry. He knew he was supposed to stay quiet, unless asked to speak. But the numbers on his scanner were getting worse. The energy patterns, ma'am, they're becoming unstable. At this rate, I think the structure might collapse within the hour. Commander Hayes walked over to look at his scanner. Her face didn't change, but Jake could see her thinking. Your point, Cadet? If it collapses, it could create a spatial rift. The energy output would be massive, could affect ships for light years around. Dr. Foster came over to look at the readings too. He's right about the instability, but we don't know enough about the technology to predict what would happen if it fails. Commander Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Jake could hear his own heart beating in his ears. We follow protocol, she said finally. We pull back to safe distance and report to command. They can decide if they want to risk a ship investigating further. But, Commander Jake said, unable to stop himself, what if we could prevent the collapse? The bridge went quiet. Everyone turned to stare at Jake. He knew he was pushing his luck, but he couldn't help it. He had an idea, and it might work. Explain, Commander Hayes said in a cold voice. Jake took a deep breath. Our quantum cannon. It's designed to fire precise energy bursts. If we could calculate the right frequency and power level, we might be able to stabilize the structure's energy patterns. That's completely theoretical, Lieutenant Carter said. We've never tried anything like that, and it would require us to get much closer, Dr. Foster added. If the Cadet is wrong, we could be destroyed in the collapse. Commander Hayes stared at Jake for what felt like forever. The quantum cannon is experimental technology. Cadet, it's not a toy. And I don't risk my ship and crew on the theories of a cadet fresh out of the academy. Jake felt his face get hot. But Commander, if I'm right, we could save the structure. Think of what we could learn from technology, that old. If you're wrong, we all die, Commander Hayes said sharply. The answer is no. We retreat to safe distance immediately. She turned to Lieutenant Carter. Set course away from the structure. Maximum safe speed. Yes, ma'am, Carter replied. Jake watched the alien structure getting smaller on the main screen as they pulled away. The energy readings on his scanner kept getting worse. In his mind, he could see the massive explosion that would happen when the structure finally collapsed. All that ancient technology lost forever. He thought about his instructors at the academy. They had always told him he was too impulsive, too willing to take risks. But they had also said he had good instincts about technology. What if his instincts were right this time? Jake looked around the bridge. Everyone was focused on their stations. Watching the retreat, Commander Hayes was talking quietly with Dr. Foster. No one was paying attention to him. His hands started to shake as he realized what he was thinking. It was crazy. It would probably get him kicked out of the service. But what if he was right? What if he could save the structure? Jake's fingers moved over his scanner controls. The quantum cannon could be fired from any station on the ship if you knew the right codes. And Jake had spent hours studying the cannon's systems during his off-duty time. He looked at the structure one more time. The energy readings were getting critical. In a few minutes, it would be too late. Jake made his choice. His fingers flew over the controls, entering the firing sequence. Calculated the frequency and power level as quickly as he could. It wasn't perfect, but it might work. Quantum cannon charging, ship's computer announced. Everyone on the bridge turned to stare at Jake. Commander Hayes' face went white with anger. Cadet Morrison stepped away from that console immediately, but it was too late. Jake had already pressed the final button. The quantum cannon fired, sending a precise beam of energy toward the alien structure. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the structure began to glow with a bright blue light that spread across its surface like fire. Jake held his breath, waiting to see if his desperate plan had worked.